You know the story with Hashlas Tapala? He walked into a restaurant and said, if you're not going to feed me, I'm going to do what my father did. So the guy got nervous and he fed him. Came back the next day, said, if you're not going to feed me, I'm going to do what my father did. He said it very forcefully. So the guy for a couple of weeks was giving him free dinners, and one day he says to him, exactly what did your father do? He went to sleep hungry. So the last thing we did properly was Tchiyas. I started talking about Tashlich. Tashlich is a very interesting story. It's a very interesting story. Because for 25 years, the Rebbe came here in Tafshin Aleph. The first Rosh Hashanah by the Rebbe was Tafshin Beis, 1941. Till like Tafshin Chavav, 1966, about 25 years. In other words, way after the Rebbe became Rebbe. The Rebbe used to walk the Tashlich. The Tashlich is about a mile from 770, maybe a little more than a mile. If you girls, if you walk down Eastern Parkway towards the Grand Army Plaza, everybody walks on the parkway, nobody walks on the sidewalk. But you pass the museum, right? The beautiful museum, it's gorgeous. I don't know about inside, but outside it's gorgeous. And then you have the library. Between the museum and the library is the park. That's called Botanical Gardens. It goes from Eastern Parkway till Empire. Most people who visit the Botanical Gardens, they go in on Empire. They don't realize there's an Eastern Parkway entrance. The Rebbe used to go in that entrance. It was a gate. It was a door that was open. You walked in. To walk out was a turnstile. You know, it means, in other words, you can go out, but you can't go back in. Because it had like bars. Pardon me? It's still there. The tragedy is they're doing the whole northern part of the park, they're redoing. I think they're even going to change the lake. The lake that the Rebbe said Tashlich by, they're redoing. If you ever visit Botanical Gardens, you have to be either a geek or love peace or a combination thereof. But if you want, you'll see the northern part of the park has been closed off for several years. They're redoing the whole thing. So I'm hoping they'll leave the lake intact, but I'm sure they're going to change the fence. Someone should go steal that turnstile. That's the famous story of the Rebbe climbing over the fence. Happened right there. What you see at Eastern Park was what was there 50, 60, 70 years ago when the Rebbe went to Tashlich. I'm afraid when they're done with redoing the park, understandably, they're probably going to take it away. And if some Lubavitcher has seichel, he'll go and steal it, that turnstile. The story is, whatever, or send it to California and put it in the Chabad house. The story was that one year it poured. Tafshin Yizan, it poured terribly, rained terribly hard. So they closed the park. The Botanical Garden closed at 5 o'clock. It's normal, 9 to 5, 9:30 to 5. But on Rosh Hashanah, they knew there was so many from Yidden living in this neighborhood at that time, in the 50s and the early 60s. It was packed. I read someplace, 250,000 Jews lived in Crown Heights. 250,000 Jews lived in Crown Heights. Way past Eastern Park, way past Lefferts, from Flatbush all the way to Rochester. It was packed with from Yidden. Every kind of community had their own shul and their own community here. They had schools here. There were a bunch of Rebbes in Crown Heights. And everyone went to Tashlich. So they kept it open. They kept it open till like 7 o'clock, till the sun went down. On Rosh Hashanah. And of course they didn't charge admission. But one year it rained so hard that nobody came. So they closed the park at 5. The Rebbe left 770 at 5. And the Rebbe, the Rebbe is not nispal from the rain. The Rebbe gets a special pleasure out of walking in the rain. He gets a special pleasure out of Chassidim walking. In other words, to not care what the world is saying and doing is... The Rebbe walked the Tashlich. I don't know what he did with his siddur, but he walked the Tashlich in the pouring rain. And it was locked. The Rebbe climbed over the fence. The Rebbe was over 50 years old. He climbed over the fence. And my father was a witness. My uncle was a witness.
He was at how old?
The Rebbe, in Tafshin Yudzayin, he was about 56. No, 54. And people tried to help the Rebbe. It was a tall fence. It's 12 or 14 feet high, the fence. And people tried to help the label. Machon tried to help the Rebbe. And the Rebbe turned and looked at them like, I got this. The Rebbe climbed all by himself over the fence. He dropped himself on the other side. It was probably a combination of metal and stone. It was probably a gate. I mean, the door is not 12 feet high, but the gate is 12 feet high. And then everybody climbed over the fence, and Nebuch, the elder Chassidim, needed a boost. That everybody clambered over the fence in the pouring rain. They did Tashlich. To go out wasn't a problem because of the turnstiles. So just getting in was hard. By the time they got back to 770, it had stopped raining. People wore colored hats in those days. They didn't wear black. They were gray, they were blue, they were beige. Whatever color your hat was the color of your shirt and your beard. It was, everything ran. I'm assuming that the dyes were different then as well. And the Chevre spontaneously, when they came back, started dancing in front of 770. On Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe walked out of his room with a bottle of mashke. The Rebbe Rosh Hashanah is very busy and also very earnest, and he started giving mashke. And one guy looked too good. The Rebbe touched his hat. It was dry. And the Rebbe says to him, "What's this?" So there were two people. One person says he changed. I think him the Rebbe gave. Another person said he knew about the forecast. He went before the rain. The Rebbe said, "I'm not giving you. You didn't walk in the rain. You're not getting." But the beautiful part of the story is that J.J. Hecht, Harav Yankiv Yehuda Hecht, all of Hashem, Zechenu Levracha, he used to speak in 770 at all the big Fabrengens. If he has any grandchildren in the room, I'm just going to say something very nice about your grandfather. They used to have these big Fabrengens, and the same people spoke at every one of the Fabrengens. Nobody prepared. They just got up, whatever came. They said the same speech every year. If you're a Hecht, your grandfather always prepared. He never came to 770 unprepared. And he always had something original to say. Every time he spoke, he said something interesting, novel, that nobody knew. And you knew, Rabbi Hecht, when he spoke in 770 to us, he respected us enough to prepare. So one time, his speech was that he had a big shul, the largest shul in East Lapush. He was a very big Rav, a very prominent rabbi. He had hundreds of congregants. And he asked the Rebbe whether he should join the Rebbe for Tashlich, because if he joined the Tashlich, the whole shul is going to sit and talk about the Brooklyn Dodgers, Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe told him to put on the sink in his kitchen, and say Tashlich with the water in the sink, to stay in shul and fabring with his people, learn with them, give them the lyhadus, and that during Aseret Tshuva he should go to a place with his fish and say Tashlich. A lot of people who don't have Tashlich and Yom Tov, you go during Aseret Tshuva. So he did that. That year when the Rebbe climbed the fence, see, he must have heard the story. I mean, it was like the story. The Rebbe climbed over the fence and the whole thing, and they gave mashke. When Yankel Hecht came to the Fabrengen, and the Rebbe gave him mashke, the Rebbe gave him wine, Matzah Shana for Kei Shabbat, the Rebbe leaned forward, and he whispered to him in Yiddish. Yesterday when I was climbing over the fence, I said, what a pity. Yankel's not here. I showed Yankel. They said, "What a pity, Yankel is not here." They never wanted him to participate. But of course, the story that I probably told the story with Zalman Polzner. I told you that the first year, Tafshin Beis, Crown Heights was not full of Fromma Yidden. It was full of modern Jews who later moved to the island and back to the city. Crown Heights was like the Beverly Hills, or even more exclusive of Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was the richest borough. Brooklyn was the richest of the 5 boroughs in those days. Rich people didn't live in Manhattan. They didn't in Long Island, lived in Brooklyn. And Crown Heights was the creme de la creme. It was the apple of the eye of Brooklyn. And the Fiedekeb, of course, moved in and ruined the neighborhood. I wish the neighborhood would stay ruined because nobody can afford to buy a house. I mean, it's impossible unless you're pushed rich. My students, my friends are all moving away. They can't live here. So apparently the property value really went down bad. So the Rebbe walked out of 770. The Rebbe asked, the year before he wasn't here. The first time, the Fiedekeb moved to 770 right before Rosh Hashanah, but the Rebbe was still in France that year. So the following year, when the Rebbe came, the Rebbe first of all asked if there's a place to do Tashlich, and they told him, yeah. He said, what time are you going? 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, the Rebbe walked out of his office. There was about 80 men, which I thought was a lot of people. And they started walking, and the Rebbe stops. The Rebbe was then, in 1941, the Rebbe was 39 years old, which means he was a relatively young man, and he was also very unknown. And the Rebbe says, Nitazeh Gateman, that's not how you walk. So everyone stops. The respect they had for the Rebbe, the respect that people had for the Rebbe, because of his presence, not because of what he said, but his presence. He wasn't a Rebbe yet. It was so awe-inspiring. If you met the Rebbe face to face, his presence just, it created a respect. Nitas, everyone stopped. The Gain Sveit say, why don't you take a pair and march like in formation, like soldiers. And then the Rebbe thinks for a moment, und sagen again, and sing. To sing in Crown Heights then was such a chutzpah, it was such a bold move. So that's how they went to Tashlich all the years. When the Rebbe went to Tashlich till 1966, 65, 67, he used to walk. And he had his partner. The Rebbe's partner was Chadakov. The Rebbe walked at the head of the procession. The Rebbe walked very fast. Everybody followed behind the Rebbe. In the later years, it was one of the sights of Crown Heights. The whole of Crown Heights used to come out to watch the Rebbe walk to Tashlich. It was frum. At that in the 50s, it was frum. But the Crown Heights Jews, all of them, were very proud to live near the Rebbe. They weren't Lubavitchers. When they had a problem, they came here. They were very aware of the Rebbe, and many, many people would stand and watch. Many people even would join the procession. Would walk with the Rebbe. He used to walk very fast. But that first year, 1941, Tafshin Beis, The Rebbe walked out of the procession, he started to sing, and all of these conservative and reform Jews came out of their homes. They'd all been in temple that day. Nobody was working. To watch the scene of the Hasidim singing. It was really, really an invasion of their space. And the Rebbe walked back with Union Street. He didn't go the same way both ways. He would either go back with Eastern Park, come back with President, or with Union. Sometimes, I think he always went to Eastern Park, but he didn't go, he always went on a different street back. Zalman Posner tells the story, it was about Mitzvah Yingel, and he was so embarrassed by this. So he said, I learned the power of prayer. I asked the Eibishter that next year I shouldn't have to be so embarrassed. And the Eibishter answered his prayer in the form of an old chassid who probably couldn't walk fast. His name was Reb Shmuel, the Mashpia, Reb Shmuel Levittin. He walked slowly, and he also davened slowly. I heard from people, I don't remember Reb Shmuel, that Achei Temimim took him 5 minutes. He was a gewaldige Yiddishman. He was such a God-fearing man. And Ashahakal was 60 seconds. A bracha. He makes hundreds of brachas. He makes 100 brachas a day. Every bracha was a minute. He was an Eloch Yid like you didn't see 100 years ago. He was in a different world, different level. So Tashlich took him 20 minutes. So Reb Shmuel asked Zalman to walk with him, and Zalman was delighted. And they came to Tashlich when they was leaving already. He walked slow, Pashit. Anyway, they did their thing. It took a long time, and then they went back also with Union Street, which is how the Rebbe went back. And many of the people who would come out of their homes to witness this spectacle had already gotten into the house, but some were still outside. And a man walks up to Zalman, who was 14 years old, grabs him by the jacket, and says, "Why are they singing?" And Zalman is thinking, this is the Eibishter sense of humor. I don't have to participate in the mart. I have to just explain it. How am I going to explain it that I'm not that we should walk in and sing? It was such a crazy thing to do. So he doesn't know what to say. So he starts to stammer, he starts to stutter, and before he can get any words out, this guy tells him, I'll tell you why they're singing. He says they walked by. He says every Jew, this man, this middle-aged American Jew, so every Jew has inside an ember, a gacheles, a fire. But it gets sleepy, it gets fashlavim, becomes latent. He says when they walked by and they were singing, I'm proud to be a Jew, I'm proud to be a Jew. And I promise you they were not singing I'm proud to be a Jew. They were singing some Yiddish or Hebrew song, but that's what he heard. I'm proud to be a Jew. That ember ignited and burst into flames, and he walked away. He told Zalman Posner what the singing accomplished for him. And it was a lesson. It was a lesson. A young American boy who's going to become a part of the most unusual and different army. That one of the things that Lubavitch does is make noise. You know, when we started the Miftzayim, is go out in the streets of the mitzvah tanks with the noise. So unless you were the kind of guy who liked noise, it was like weird. Why are you making noise? We sound like the African Americans with the boom boxes. You don't even see them with boom boxes anymore. But in the 70s, every African American had a boom box. But you realize that you were getting people's attention. And we assume it's bad attention. We assume that they don't like us and they think we're crazy, but quite often the attention is unbelievably positive. And it's all the Rebbe. This is all the Rebbe's. These are the Rebbe's brain children. You live in America, do as Americans do. Americans show off, we're going to show off Judaism. Americans make noise, we're going to make noise with Yiddishkeit. And we see the success. But this is, as Zalman put it, the first time that Rebbe showed his hand and how we thought about the Yiddishkeit in America. Anyways, Tashlich, with 25 years Rebbe went to Tashlich. I don't know exactly how many. By the way, there's actually a picture. The last time that Rebbe went to Tashlich, my father told me, he comes to the lake. It was a man-made lake with fish. There's a row of tripods. Click, every newspaper in New York took pictures of the Rebbe. And then there were probably 20 or 30 papers. Today you couldn't get 2 papers out of New York because everything is electronic. And the Rebbe was photographed. He didn't do this, you know. And he came back and says, I'm not going to go next year, even if I have to do Tashlich Tshuva. And they dug and they found behind the library, behind the building next door, they found a fountain, a well, and they made Tashlich over there. And then some 20 years later, they built an apartment for the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, because the Rebbe couldn't walk anymore. The Rebbe couldn't go home. So the Rebbe used to stay in his room for Shabbos and Yom Tov, and the Rebbetzin was alone on President Street. So they built an apartment at the back of the library, and the Rebbe used to come. Every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, we say Rosh Hashanah, we say Yom Kippur, we say Sukkot. Every Shabbos. And the Rebbe used to walk across the little deck for them together Shabbos, so they had to destroy that Tashlich behind the library, and they made it where it is now. Behind 770. And the Rebbe used to Tashlich. Tashlich, no big deal. He went out, read a few words, shook his tzitzis, and that was the end of that. Now, one of the big chedushim by the Rebbe, was the idea that he said a maimer with a fabrengen. The earlier Rebbeim, Rosh Hashanah, Bachlal, they said a maimer. The Rebbe came and said a maimer. The second night of Hashanah was a maimer. The third night of Hashanah was a maimer. The Rebbe made a fabrengen Matzah Yom Tov, and he washed, and he ate a suda, and he benched, and he gave Kei Shel Bracha. In the beginning, he would wash and bench, and after benching, he would say the maimer. But within a few years, the Rebbe changed that. Matzah Rosh Hashanah was always the fabrengen. After every big Yom Tov, Matzah Rosh Hashanah, Matzah Simchas Torah, Matzah Pesach, Matzah Shavuos was a big fabrengen. They used to come in before the Shkia. Let's say the Shkia is now around what? 7:35, something like that. The Rebbe came, let's say 7:25, they would wash, he would check his nails. There's actually film of the Rebbe washing. Check his nails, he would wash his hands. Beautifully. Everything the Rebbe did was so exact. But you could watch the Rebbe, you could learn so many things from observing the Rebbe do this. And then he ate a little challah. I mean, there wasn't exactly chicken and soup and fish. There was challah, and in the early years, the Rebbe used to drink soda, seltzer, a couple of soda. In the later years, I don't even think he did that. And drank wine, that was the whole soda. And there was fabreng. The Rosh Hashanah fabrengens were short. They were not long. Simchas Torah fabrengens were very long. The Rosh Hashanah fabrengens were quite short, within less than 2 hours, let's say. But the fabrengen was dominated by two features. One feature was a maimer. Matzah Rosh Hashanah was a long maimer. It could be an hour. It was one of the longest maimarim of the year. And there's actually a reason why. And the Rebbe said why. Because the Rabbeim had a minig to start saying a maimer Chassidus when it was still Rosh Hashanah, to finish the maimer Chassidus when it's for sure no longer Rosh Hashanah, to connect the head to the body. That was the logic. So the Rebbe would start a maimer right away, came out, almost as soon as the Fabrengen would start. And the maimer was very long. And he would start the maimer with it. So Rosh Hashanah finished bringing Matzah Rosh Hashanah. The fabrengens, that was probably 70% of fabrengen was the maimer. There were a few short sichos, but the preeminent feature of the Rosh Hashanah fabrengen was a long maimer. And the Rebbe used to always ask that we should sing a niggin before, and we would say a niggin with a maimer, with a niggin. The Rebbe had a style of saying maimorim where he would remain sitting and he would speak like a sicha, except the words were the words of a maimer. So we shouldn't have to stand up, and the Rebbe used to keep his eyes open. When the Rebbe said a maimer Chassidus, he would ask for a niggin. And you would see, if you were paying attention, he would lean forward, he'd put his hand in his pocket, he'd pull out a kerchief, and you could watch the Rebbe wrapping it, and you could see. Then lean forward a second time and wrap it. My brother and I used to creep under the Rebbe's table, and we could look up, literally under the floor, and watch the Rebbe with the kerchief. As children we did this. We came out like chimney sweeps. there was schmutz down there from 20 years, and we would clean it all out. We were not the only kids who went, so it was cleaned up from time to time. Remember once Matzah Pesach, we went and we found a whole chalas sitting underneath that platform. That wasn't good. But and the Rebbe would put on a kerchief, and we would sing a niggin, and everyone would stand up. And then would close his eyes and bend his head. So the maimer usually was harder to hear because the Rebbe wasn't sitting up, his head was down. But a maimer ke'ein sicha, the Rebbe would just sit like a regular sicha and talk. But Matzah Rosh Hashanah, until Memvav, this time of the last year, Vayechulu, I think it was Vayechulu, Matzah Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe stopped saying Maimarim with a niggin, and then in Mem Tes, when the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe stopped saying Maimarim altogether. But the Rebbe say a maimer Rosh Hashanah, a long maimer. The other feature, which is unusual about Rosh Hashanah, and this you know about, this is what they call Seder Negunim. The Rebbe started this. That he used to ask that you sing a niggin for the Baal Shem Tov, for the Mesicher Maggid, for all the Rebbe, from the Alter Rebbe, from the Middle Rebbe, from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the Rebbe Marash, from the Rebbe Rashab, from the Friedrich Rebbe. Each Rosh Hashanah. Later on it became other times as well, but from the beginning of the Nesias, Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe mentioned each of the Rebbeim. As soon as the Rebbe started, I don't know when it started, but Yael Khan, the Rebbe used to turn to Yael. Before Yael Khan, there was a Yid named Shmuel Zalmanov, who I imagine most of you never heard of, but he was a very, very big chassid. His son just recently passed away. Shmuel Zalmanov was very close to the Rebbe, very close to the Rebbe. He was the Menagin. He had to move to Israel around 1965. And when he moved to Tzol, so Rabbi Yael got that schus. Rabbi used to turn to Rabbi Yael to start the Negunim. A niggin for each one of the Rebbeim in order. Also, during the Fabrengen, the Rebbe found a way of mentioning each one of the Rebbeim by name. He would tell a story. He would mention each of the Rebbeim. So later on, in the later years, Rabbi Yael would sing a niggin for each one of the Rebbeim. And when he finished the Friedrich Rebbe's, he would, without asking the Rebbe permission, the Rebbe never said sing my niggin, he would sing either Hu Elokeinu or Atav Chatanu. If it was Shabbos, it was Hu Elokeinu. If it was a week, he would sing Atav Chatanu. And then at some later point yet, after he sang the Rebbe's niggin, he would sing the Rebbe's father's niggin. Ay, 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 ay. And the Rebbe really liked it. The Rebbe was happy. So you have really 10 Rabbeim, if you count the Rebbe's father, right? From the Baal Shem Tov till the Rebbe's 9. So they ended up singing a nigun from each one of the Rabbeim, including the Rebbe's father. And during the course of the Fabering of Matzah Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe used to mention the Rabbeim by name. He would say that the Gemara says that every single morning in the Beis HaMikdash, they used to say, Hey, they wouldn't start doing the avodah and say the sun has reached Chevron. Chevron is a few minutes west of Yerushalayim. So they would start a few minutes after Netzach Chama. They waited for the sun to get to Chevron. So they didn't start the day mamish at Netzach Chama. They waited a few more minutes. Why? Because they wanted to mention Chevron. The only reason, the Gemara says, the only reason they did it is because they wanted to mention Schus Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov. So every morning in the Beis HaMikdash, they would say, Hey, Pnei HaMizrach, Ache B'Chevron. So the day would start in the Beis HaMikdash by mentioning the Avos HaElam, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov. So the Rebbe used to say, our fathers are the Heilige Rabbeim from the Baal Shem Tov. And the Rebbe used to sing a nigun from each Rebbe, and he would also say, he would mention them, he would tell a story, he'd say Advar Teda, and whatever it was. This was Rosh Hashanah. After the Fabering, the Rebbe gave Keshe Bracha, which could take, Keshe Bracha could take longer than the Fabering in itself. Fabering could last an hour and a half. Keshe Bracha could take 2 or 3 hours. The Rebbe gave everybody. You would walk by, they would look into your eyes, L'chaim L'bracha, L'chaim L'bracha, L'chaim L'bracha. I am too young for this. But in the earlier years, when Lubavitch was smaller, the Rebbe gave you wine, and you wouldn't walk away. You would stand there, and the vow the Rebbe is giving the next person, and you would say a bracha be'er pri hagafen, taste a little bit, and then lean forward and say to the Rebbe l'chaim. And as the Rebbe is pouring wine to the next person, or the person after the next person, the Rebbe will answer l'chaim with the bracha. When I was a little kid, my father used to say to me, when you go up to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gives you one, make a bracha, drink a little, and say to the Rebbe l'chaim. But my childhood begins, my memories, early 70s, mid 70s, it was no longer possible. They were moving you too fast. In the 50s and even in the 60s, they let you stand there. You got wine from the Rebbe, you didn't walk away. You stood, and you would make a bracha, sip a little bit of the wine the Rebbe gave you, and then say to the Rebbe l'chaim. The Rebbe would answer you, to each person. He was doing 2 things at once. He was giving wine to the next guy and answering l'chaim bracha to the person before. And you would walk away right in front of the Rebbe. You would walk backwards in front of the Rebbe. Then later on they changed that also. You just continue going. But when I was a child, you would get wine from the Rebbe, and then you would make a step down, and then walk, looking straight at the Rebbe, you would walk down a path out of the shul. That's how it was for many, many years, until probably the early 80s, late 70s. Now, the next day is a fast day, Tzem Gedalia. So the Rebbe made a minhag, right? The Rebbe reintroduced the old minhag. It says in Halacha that on a fast day you're allowed to work. Fast day you're allowed to work, right? Except for Tisha B'Av, you're allowed to work on a fast day. But it says in Halacha that there was a tradition by Jews that at midday they closed their businesses. If you were a businessman, or you were a shopkeeper, or you were a producer of material, after lunch you would close your shop and go to shul. You would have an early mincha, and then you would hang out till the end of the fast. What did they do in shul? So one of the members of the community would get up and speak Divrei Musa, Divrei Yisrael. This is brought in Halacha. But people stopped doing that. No one did it anymore. You came to shul early and you spoke Dvar B'Teilim. So in 1978, Tafshin Lamed Ches, after the Rebbe's heart attack, the Rebbe turned around and Asara B'Tevis, and he spoke, and he said, I don't know why people stopped doing this minhag, but we're going to bring it back. And every fast day after Mincha, the Rebbe used to speak Asara B'Tevis, Tainis Esther, Shivasa B'Tamuz, and Tzem Gedalia. So the Rebbe davened Mincha 3:15, the Rebbe got maftir always, at 3:15 Mincha, and after Mincha we spoke a Sikha, and after the Sikha, the Rebbe gave dollars through the Tankisten. In the later years, the Rebbe used to give dollars himself, but the Rebbe used to give to the Bachrim, the boys that went in the tanks. They would give them dollars, and they would give each one of us $1, and that's how we celebrate our fasts, or commemorate our fasts. The Rebbe used to speak every after Mincha, and the Rebbe's style, B'chlal, by everything is, when he started on a new Inyan, the first few years he would introduce the basics, what does the fast mean, and then of course once he did it, he would say, I already spoke about it, so I'm going to speak about other things. And the Rebbe did this for about 15 years, from Lamed Ches till Nun Beis, that he spoke on all the fasts, beginning with Asara B'Tevis and ending with Asara B'Tevis. Now, what happened to make tshuva? So, Amolek Zeiten used to be a Fabrengen for the Rebbe's mother's Yortzeit, Vav Tishrei, the Rebbe davened for Yomid, Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, and we all came and got places. We want to hear the Rebbe daven. The Rebbe used to daven Shabbos, Vav Tishrei could be Shabbos, and you heard the Rebbe singing, whatever, Hula Kei, the Rebbe did Mamish sing, Keilad, and there's some interesting things, but I don't have time to go into these details. I remember that in Tafshin Memhei, which was the 20th Yortzeit of the Rebbe's mother, after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe started talking. I had a very good place. I was very close. There was no mic. He started to talk. He says, it's 20 years since my mother passed away, so I'm going to give money from Keren Chana to anybody who's going to build a mikveh. And of course, as soon as the Rebbe started talking, it became right away noising and pushing, and they went to get the mic. But the Rebbe davened for the Yomid. Matzav, and of course he always went to the Oyel, went to the Rebbe, went to his mother. And Matzav of Tishrei was on the Fabrengen. The Fabrengen of Tishrei was not always a Seres Yimei, it was a yard-side Fabrengen. A yard-side Fabrengen was marked by the Siyum. Let me speak on the yard-side of his mother, on the yard-side of his father, and on the yard-side of his Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe said a Hadrin, a Siyum Mesechte. On his father's yard-side and his mother's yard-side, that was the preeminent feature of the Fabrengen. The Rebbe didn't even say a Maimed always. Not always was a Maimed of Tishrei. Sometimes there was, sometimes there wasn't. The prominent feature of the Vav Tishrei Fabrengen was they said a Siyum Mesechte. And the reason is because people used to fast on the day that your mother passes away. The Rebbe didn't want to fast, so the Rebbe made a Siyum Mesechte, so it became a Yom Tov, so he didn't have to fast. That's the excuse. But the Rebbe always made a Siyum Mesechte on his mother's yard-side and on his father's yard-side. And then, of course, when the Rebbe and Chai and Mushka passed away, there was no more weekday Fabrengens, no more. So the Rebbe stopped Fabrengen Vav Tishrei, and it became the day for the Machon Soul Development Fund. This is one of the late features of Lubavitch. All the good clips of the Rebbe talking to people privately, the Rebbe made a fund where people gave him money. You had to give him $100,000 over 5 years, or you can give him $1 million or $10 million, whatever you wanted to give. But it was divided over 5 years. And they got to meet the Rebbe twice a year before Pesach or Tishrei. All the men and women would come, the women separate, men separate, and the Rebbe would speak to them as a group. And then as couples, they would have like a mini lyhadus. And they would sit for hours and talk to each one of them. And each time you came, you had to give $10,000. So it's twice a year, times 5 is $100,000. The money was for the Rebbe to use however he wished, no questions asked. And it had to be in addition to all the other money he gave to Tzedakah. And it was an opportunity to meet the Rebbe, to talk to the Rebbe, ask the Rebbe questions. And you could see all those delicious films that you see in Gem, where people are talking to the Rebbe privately, and it doesn't look like dollars. That's what it is. It's Machon Yisrael. So they did it on Vav Tishrei. They would clean out the shul, they put it in mechitzas. Some of these people were very rich. A lot of them were not frum, had to make the shul. How do you make 770 and look normal? What the answer to that question is, you can't. There's no way. But they tried. They didn't put drapes to block the pipes, the poles and the ceiling, don't ask. The ceiling now has a dropped ceiling. Then it was just beams. The ceiling of 7.7 that you see is lowered by 4 or 5 feet. It was 4 or 5 feet higher. And it didn't look pretty, but it served its purpose very well. So that's what happened in Vav Tishrei. Now, Erev Yom Kippur, we don't say Tachnan, by the way, but it's one of those interesting things. The night before you do say Tachnan. Erev Yom Kippur, after Chatzos, you don't say Tachnan. The Seder by the Rebbe was that he came to shul 7 o'clock in the morning, which was the Rebbe very early. And the Rebbe's chicken was waiting for him in his room. They brought the kapara for the Rebbe. The Rebbe did kaparas. They would walk out the front door of 770, walk to the side where they make that big sukkah, and the sheikhet was waiting for him, and he would shech the Rebbe's kapara.
How long was the Rebbe in the room with the chicken?
15 minutes. How much time did it take with the chicken? I don't know what kind of fabrengen he had with the chicken, but the Rebbe came at 7. By 7:15, 7:20, he came from his house. By 7, he came up with the chicken. The sheikhet for the first 20 years was a chassid by the name of Rabbi Yechon and Gordon. He probably has children in this room. When Rabbi Yechon and Gordon passed away, it became the...
That's my great-grandfather.
Who? Yechonen. He was a very special Yid. What is your name?
What?
What is your name?
Maya.
No, your last name.
Gordon.
You're Josh's granddaughter. Who's your father? Yossi?
Yochanan.
Okay, all hail Yechonen. Yechonen was a personality. Your father is named after him. Your father's his you're a great-great-granddaughter.
Yeah.
So he was the sheikhet, and then when he passed away, it became so Shimon Kalmanson was the sheikhet. Here's the thing you have to know: if you shechted the Rebbe's kapara, which was considered an honor, you have to stop talking. If you don't stop talking, I would do what my father did. Yeah. Please stop whispering. If you shechted the Rebbe's kapara, you had the distinction, or the dubious distinction, of giving the Rebbe malchus. It went together. Which means the Rebbe would get down on his hands and knees, and you would flog him. Erev Yom Kippur. So it wasn't so pashut.
Isn't it just a tap though?
Yeah, of course, it doesn't matter. The Rebbe's getting on his hands and knees, and you're standing behind him and you're hitting him. Doesn't matter how hard you're hitting him. It was nobody wanted to do it. But whoever did the kapara, had a kapara, you understand? I heard that the first time Yechonen did it, the Rebbe called Yechonen to do kaparas. Okay, fine. And then the Rebbe said, whoever does the sheikhet for kaparas has to get malchus. He pushed it after he did it. He sat down in shul and he just hit the Rebbe 39 times. And he did this very, I don't know if you ever get used to such a thing, but I heard that the first time he went into the shul and fell apart. They get on his hands and knees, and you stand behind him, 39 lashes. Of course, you don't really hit the person, it's a symbolic thing, but nevertheless, and that's how it was. So the 720 is kaparas. Kaparas took a minute. He came out, Rebbe held the chicken the way the Peter wants to hold the chicken, not by the legs, but by the feather, by the wings, because holding the chicken by the wings is really cruel and unusual. We hold the chicken by the wings rather than by the feet because we're more afraid of the chicken than the chicken is of us, because we're really, really good at handling farm animals. But the Rebbe used to hold the chicken by the wings. He wouldn't hold it like this. You imagine someone takes you by the hands and holds you up and carries you. There's a name for that. You know what that's called? That's called crucifixion. That's how you crucify a person. So they're really, really right. You shouldn't hold the chicken, but it's just easy. Hold the chicken by the wings. It hurts. The Rebbe used to hold the feathers down and hold the legs, which is how my father does it. So most people don't do it that way. The shachtim don't do it that way. The shachtim grab the wings, kill the guy before the bird has a chance to say, excuse me. But the Rebbe held the chicken by the wings. He would come to the back of the chotzit. He would hand the chicken to the chalif, who took it by the wings, and he would shecht it. And he had a little piece of cardboard with some sand. Covering the sand of a chicken is a mitzvah de'oraisa. Birds and chayes. Behemoths is not. Birds and wild animals, it's a mitzvah de'oraisa called kisei hadam. And he would take 3 feathers out of the back of the bird after the shechita. He made like a little scoop, and he would hand it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe used to make the bracha. He would shove a little sand over the blood which had been dripped on this little cardboard. He would put down the 3 feathers. He would say yashkech and walk. The whole thing took a minute. The thing that was interesting, and this is true by all the Rebbeim, when you shechted the Rebbe's chicken, you could see in the film, there's videos, it would shake. Killing an animal, for him. The Rebbe said the Frierdiker Rebbe was a shoyichet, and nevertheless, when they shechted his kapora, if they get matresel. Anyway, I think the Rebbe went to Shachar, to mikveh for Shachar. I'm almost positive, but I'm not sure. The Rebbe went to Erev Kippur mikveh once. Right? We go to mikveh 3 times. They went to Erev Kippur once. Most years, the Rebbe did not go to the oil. Nun Beis, the Rebbe went to the oil. Erev Kippur. That was the year of the stroke. But as far as I know, most years the Rebbe, but he went to the mikveh, because going to the mikveh, Erev Kippur is a de'oraisa. And if I'm not mistaken, the Rebbe went before Shachris. Most people, the Ikir is before Mincheh. The Rebbe went before Shachris. Now, as I told you last time, Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur were from the few times that the Rebbe davened with a minyan. And Shachris was whenever the Rebbe wanted. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. I think Take 12 or 5 to 12 was the Erev Yom Kippur. Tafshin and Beis came very late. The Gabi would announce, Mincha, Shachris, V'Zayin, great. Shachris would be when we're ready, which meant the Rebbe was ready. So it could be whatever time the Rebbe wanted, early, late. It was a normal Shachris, there's no Tachanun, there's no Avinu Malkeinu. In our custom, we don't say Avinu Malkeinu, no Tachanun. And back to his room. Now, what did the Lubavitcher Rebbe do the entire Erev Yom Kippur? Does anybody know? What did the Lubavitcher Rebbe spend 6-7 hours Erev Yom Kippur doing? Handing out honey cake. You think about it and you say, did Rebbe have nothing better to do? You must understand, giving lekach is not a Lubavitcher minig. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, you know who gave lekach in Lubavitch? The Rebbitzin. Seriously. The Chassidim used to come to the Rebbitzin in each generation. The Rebbitzin gave cake. The Rebbe gives cake. Erev Yom Kippur, Rebbe gives lekach. Somebody told me, and I choose to believe it because I choose to believe it, it's a munkach minig. The Rebbe had a person whom he revered. I mean, the Frierdiker Rebbe was the Rebbe's whole world. The person whom the Rebbe followed in the Yom Halacha minig, a tiny bit, but still, was Choishev Mokam by the Rebbe, was the Minchas HaLazar, the Munkach Rebbe, Rav Chaim Eliezer Shapiro of Munkach. He passed away in 1937. The current Munkach Rebbe is his daughter's son. She also passed away young. She passed away in 1944 in Hungary, and left an orphaned little boy. His name is Rabinovich. The Munkach Rebbe was Shapiro because he didn't have any sons. The Rabbeim held in the Munchas letter ba'olam loyeh, and there are minhagim that the Rebbe adopted, and not Lubavitcher minhagim, that the Munkach minhagim, giving matzahs, the Munkach minig. That's what I heard, giving lekach. But the Rebbe stood by his door with his silka potter, gattel, handing out cake. So he baked the cake in Albany Bakery, Olav Shalom, which doesn't exist anymore. I mean, the bakery is there, but they don't bake anymore there. And the cake would come in these big, big boxes, cut into little squares. And the Rebbe used to take the cake with his hand and place it in your hand, no napkins, no gloves, and he would say, Lishona Teva Mesukah. And the Mesukah was so sweet. A good Aziz Yad. In Hebrew, Lishona Teva Mesukah. But he would look at you and decide how much cake to give. If you were a bachad, you got a piece. If you were married, you got a whole piece and a piece of a piece. If you were a child, Rebbe used to break a cake in half and give you half a piece, or a third of a piece, or 2/3 of a piece. Erev Yom Kippur not. The women got the Shana Rabbah. But same thing, you put it into your hand. You put it into your hand. You put it into your hand. Now wait, there was always napkins over there, because you have a few stateshna people who worry about hygiene. But usually what would happen is, they would give you a napkin, the Rebbe would take the cake, put it in your hand, and put the napkin on top. The napkin was symbolic. The Rebbe used to touch the cake and put it into your hand. Now there's films of the Rebbe giving honey cake. And you could see how he's giving probably from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2:30, the Rebbe gave cake. 2:30 he would close the door to get ready for mincha. 3:15 was mincha. After mincha was a sicha, a bracha. After mincha, back to the room. And he continued giving lekach. Now, Erev Yom Kippur, it's a mitzvah to eat. The Rebbe fasted. Stood the whole day giving honey cake. The Rebbe used to go home around 5:30. Yom Tov comes at 6:30. The Rebbe Tzchayamushka used to say that the man kommt daheim, hatte nicht kein Keach zu essen. The Rebbe was so tired from giving cake. She puts food on the table. You're supposed to eat twice a day. Yeah? And people eat all day long. The Rebbe ate one meal. The Rebbe said that he didn't have the physical strength to put the food in his mouth. That's what the Rebbe Tzchayamushka described. A ganze Tag. It's not normal. The Rebbe gave honey cake, and anybody who wanted came. It wasn't yet to be a Lubavitcher, you had to carry a card. You got in line. And the Rebbe stood hours. I remember I stood with my father for 3 hours, and they slammed the door on us. For mincha, I was so upset, I took it personally. And my father tried to explain to me that I should try and understand how the Rebbe feels. And I couldn't. They couldn't. 10 more people. We managed 10 people from the door. They closed the door. And as long as I live, I remember the honey cake I didn't get. The honey cake I got, I remember that honey cake, but what I remember most was the time that they closed the door and I didn't get lekach. And maybe it's a lekach. It's a lesson. A whole day giving cake. And you watch. They picks up a piece of cake, looks at you, puts it on, takes a different piece. I once saw a video, puts on a piece of cake, flips it with his finger, and the cake flies up and they woo, 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 woo. The way the Rebbe gave the cake was also epis-ruchniistic. This giving lekach, the Rebbe did twice. He did Erev Yom Kippur a whole day, and the Shana Rabbah a whole day. But the Shana Rabbah, he stood by the entrance to the sukkah, even if it was raining. Also with his Shabbos day, he took a gadol and a hat. Same Seder, Lashon Teva Mesukah. But Erev Shana Rabbah, the Rebbe gave women also. Men separate and women, everybody cake, anybody who wanted. Now around Mem Vav, 85, 86, 87, I don't know what year it was, someone came up with a bright idea. Number one, put the cake in a plastic bag, which means everyone gets the same size. This business of the Rebbe bringing, when the Rebbe went into Yom Kippur, his fingernail was honey. He handled thousands of people of cake, and he would literally break the cake in half, look at you and give you a piece, L'shana Teva Mesukah, a whole piece, a half a piece, a third of a piece, 2/3 of a piece. It's fascinating to consider that the Rebbe spent all that time. So they decided they got the Rebbe's permission to put it in a plastic bag. So everyone got the same size. If the Rebbe liked you, he gave you 2 bags. So it was much, much quicker. There was none of this breaking cake and looking at you and flipping it into the air. He just gave you everybody. And so you got L'shon Teva Mesukah. So once that started, the Rebbe started giving women also before Yom Kippur. Men and women. You would line up and they would give everybody a piece of lekach. And usually it came with $1, because this was already the season that the Rebbe gave dollars on every occasion. And also with a kuntris, with a maimer, or with a sicha, or with a letter. And we would get from the Rebbe honey cake. And the other big chiddush was that he didn't do it Erev Yom Kippur, he did the Sesame Tshuva. Erev Yom Kippur was a very hard day for the Rebbe. And so starting around 86, 85, 86, maybe 87, that means Mem Vov, they would give, the Rebbe would stand, one of the Sesame Tshuva, could be Vav Tishrei, for hours. And just like dollars. But it was much quicker. Many, many more people were able to go by. L'shana Teva Mesukah, L'shana Teva Mesukah, L'shana Teva Mesukah. And if you came for somebody else, he gave you 2 bags, or 3 bags, or 4 bags, which meant you got $2, or $3, or $4. There was no more sitting over there and figuring out how much cake to give you. The whole tziyah that Rebbe giving lekach is so personal. Rebbe looked at you and decided what cake to give you. What cake? What kind of cake? It's a fascinating phenomenon. The idea is interesting. And that's how it was. Erev Yom Kippur, I saw now that some privileged characters managed to sneak in and get cake from the Rebbe then. Then they were davening for mincha. Now, girls, I said this. Yom Kippur, you say al chet 10 times. Okay. By mincha at Yom Kippur, you're going to say al chet in the small, the quiet shmoneh, which means you'll turn to the davening of Yom Kippur. You'll start from the kind of tzed and you'll read till the end. By chazar sashat, you do not say al chet, just in the quiet shmoneh. When you'll come to shul before lichtbenchen on Yom Kippur, the first thing you'll do is before you start kol nidrei, say al chet. Now, if you come to shul, the means already saying kol nidrei. Don't worry, you can catch up. The beginning, the first thing you do when you come to shul the night of Yom Kippur is say al chet again. Then you'll say it twice in Ma'ariv, twice in Shachris, twice in Musaf, and twice in Mincha. That's 10 times. In the Ili, you don't say al chet. You say it 4 times the day before. That means this year Tuesday. Once in the Shtilish B'Nesra of Mincha. Once when you come to shul after Lichtbenchen, the first thing you'll do is you'll turn to where it says the davening. Till the end of davening, you'll say till the end of Alakai. I forgot Lashon Pasuk. Whatever it is. The Alakai. It's not Alakai. It's a different Alakai. Achei Temimim. Once they tzarti, you read the whole al-chet. You'll ask somebody in shul what to say. And in Ma'ariv, you say it once in Shmonesrei. There's no chazar tashatz of Ma'ariv, but the night of Yom Kippur, they read a bunch of pages, and the chazan will say al-chet again. So you say al-chet 10 times. The Rebbe speaks a bracha. When the Rebbe first became Rebbe, this bracha was in his office. The men would go into the Rebbe's room until the room was full, and they gave a bracha after mincha. The whole thing was 30 seconds. When the crowd got bigger, they went in shifts. Men went in, they gave a bracha, they walked out, another group went in, 2 or 3 shifts. And the Rebbe used to repeat the bracha almost the same word for word. To the different. Every year the bracha was different, but if he said it to 2 or 3 groups, it was always the same. At one point, the bracha moved to the shul. And there's actually a video. They got up on a little stage. The whole thing was a minute, and he had a bracha. When I was growing up, it was no longer a bracha, it was a shichah. It could last 45 minutes. I remember the Rebbe once started the Erev bracha Yom Kippur, the bracha with the words, Men halten shein itzter by tshuva ilah. We're holding by the higher tshuva. And he spoke a whole shichah. In that shichah, he would give bracha the aces of Aleph base from the nusach of the Yom Kippur Musaf. Shnas Oira, Shnas Bracha, Shnas Gila, Shnas Disa, Shnas Heidvada, Shnas Va'atev, Shnas Zachis Gedels. I don't know this from the Machzor, I know this from the Sichas. Chsadim Gedelim, and so on, the whole Aleph base. And it always finished, Shnas Teira, Shnas Tefillah, Shnas Tshuva, Shnas Tahala. There's a lot of toughs. He went back to his room and gave more lekach. But the first year, Tafshin Yud Beis, 1951, when the Rebbe finished giving the Bracha to everybody, he turned to Rabbi Yael Khan, who was 21 and a half years old. And he told Rabbi Yael Khan, Zog de Bocherim as far kol nidre ze kenen arein. Tell the Bocherim that right before kol nidre come into my room, but only Bocherim. So that year, Yud Beis, the Bocherim, they never heard this before. This never happened in the history of Lubavitch. Before kol nidre, all the Bocherim went outside the Rebbe's room. The door was opened. The Bocherim walked into the Rebbe's own office. The Rebbe was already standing in his talus and his kittel and his talus over his head with a siddur or a chumash. And the Rebbe told him the famous words. You learn toch in the Rebbe's yeshiva, like the doch the Rebbe's kid. You learn in the Rebbe's yeshiva, so you're the Rebbe's children. And the Rebbe gave the Bocherim Birchas Habonim. He gave the bracha that a father gives children. The Rebbe didn't have children. It says in the Rebbe's Rishimis, which are now public, that the Tzeit for Yom Kippur is from Mishpacha. In the Rebbe's journal, the Frierdiker Rebbe told him, at the last hour before Yom Kippur, they kicked everybody out of the house, even the closest people. Only family. The period right for Yom Kippur was mamish only the children. Even the Shamoshim and the Gaboyim who lived in the house, they would give them hints that they were able to understand that they had to leave. The Rebbe gave a bracha to the Bocherim. This never happened. The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't do it. The Rebbe Rashab didn't do it. The Rebbe considered the Bocherim his children. And you with Bocherim will tell you that when they were Bocherim and they would ask the Rebbe a question, the Rebbe would answer them. As soon as they got married, the Rebbe would send them to Arov, and to Mashpia. The Rebbe's connection to the Bocherim and to the girls. The girls were not by the bracha, but the Rebbe considered the Bocherim his children, mamish, until they got married. And he gave them a bracha. In the beginning, it was in his room. Then the crowd got bigger and bigger, so they did it right outside the Rebbe's room. The pushing was gefelach. Then they moved to the small shul upstairs. They would empty out all the benches and tables. The pushing was so bad that it would rain, mamish. It would rain from the ceiling. The perspiration, the pushing was geferlach. So when the Rebbe had his heart attack, so they made rules that to be in the front room, the big room, you had to be either 23 years old or a chassan. If you were engaged into the front room, if you were 23. To be in the second room, between the two rooms, upstairs from 70, there's a window, which is covered by a bookcase. So they took away the bookcase, they moved away behind it, there's Sfarim. They had to move away all the Sfarim, and the Baruch would stand and look through the window. So if you were 22 years old, or if you were in the Kvutza of Meretz Yisrael, you got to stand in the second room. I was a kid, so we used to go in the sukkah outside. And we would come early, the sukkah was locked, and they would open the door, we'd come, we'd push. I usually got a pretty good space. I would run home, eat very quickly, run to the mikveh, back to 770, and I would be by the window. Now, if it was before Yom Tif, then it was on a mic, so you could hear. But if the Rebbe came a few minutes late, the Rebbe had an earlier, the Rebbe was Makabel Yom Tov earlier, at a different time. When it came the moment, the Rebbe was Makabel Yom Tov, the mic went off. So if you were not inside, or you're not very close to the window, you couldn't hear the rest of the bracha. When the Rebbe Achei Temimim passed away, the Rebbe used to ben shlicht himself. And the Rebbe came into the bracha to the Bacharim after he said ben shlicht. So after Mem Ches, beginning in 1988, Tafshin Mem Tes, there was for sure no mic, but I was already 23, so I was in the front room. But the Rebbe gave bracha to the Bacharim every year. In Meine Yoren, that bracha was already a sikh. And the Rebbe used to speak about the idea that Baruch should be makar of other Chassid Tamid Yeshiva. The Rebbe used to mention the Rambam Sefer Hashmita B'Yevel, that a Bacher is Kedesh Kadoshim, he's higher than a Kohen Gadol because his life is Torah. It was a very special moment. The Rebbe treated the Bacherim like his children. And after the bracha, they went back into his room, mamish for 60 seconds, and then they went out to the shul for Ma'ariv for Kol Nidre. Okay, we'll do this next time. Okay, I'll see you when I see you. Good.